everybody, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making this really cute nighttime scene for my little Spellbinders frog. This features the new Jump for Joy collection, which just came out this month. And I'm just making one card today, so it's going to be a little bit of a quicker video than normal. So we're going to start with the stamp set that comes in the Jump for Joy collection, and we're starting off with the Misty, and my grip mat from Waffle Flower is in there. And I'm using the Jump for Joy sentiments again. Now this has images in it as well. And I'm using this cattails image, and you see me rubbing the back of the stamp with my hand to prep it for its first stamping. You get a much better stamping when you do that. I'm using Blue Jay ink, which is just going to be slightly darker than this cardstock. This is Cosmic Sky ColorWheel cardstock from Spellbinders. And I'm going to stamp it twice just to get it dark enough. So this ink is like very similar in tone, so stamping it twice just makes it a little bit darker. I just want a very subtle stamping here. Now you see me adding my acetate on top of the cardstock. Now normally I do this to practice and get things perfectly positioned, but right now I'm just using it so that I don't have to keep cleaning my stamp in between stampings. This is pretty easy placement. I am sometimes adjusting the height of the cattails, but if I were to put the stamp on the blue paper itself, while it still has ink on it, and then if I wanted to reposition it, it would get ink on my paper. So that's why in between stampings, I am covering my paper with the acetate so then I can position the stamp and then remove it to do the stamping. And again, this is ink from Pinkfresh Studio. So here is the final stamp. Now there is a really cute stencil that is part of this collection. I'm not using that today, but that's a really great way to make another kind of scene for this frog. Now the frog itself, along with these flowers and the mushroom, come from the Frog Prints die set. And you'll see in the top left corner some of the dies, you'll see a die for a crown, and that's why it's called the Frog Prints. I am not using the crown today, but it is so adorable when you do. So here is the frog and the really pretty flowers. And, you know, just kind of setting up my scene. And while I'm looking at it, I realized my cattails are just not standing out enough. So I grabbed a blue Copic marker. This happens to be B26, and it's very similar to the ink that I used, and you'll see the little scrap of paper that I practiced with to make sure I was happy with this marker. And so I'm just filling in the open spaces of the stamp, and I really like how this is looking. And I did question whether I should fill in the leaves down below. I was a little apprehensive. I didn't want to ruin it, although doing that stamping, it was not going to be hard to recreate if I ruined it. So here I am. I did decide to go ahead and fill in the leaves. Now these are very detailed, and I was a little worried about using my brush nib on my Copic, but I didn't have a fine nib on this particular marker. I have fine nibs on some of my markers, just not a lot, but I do happen to have extra fine nibs in my stash. So I'm trying to be very careful filling in these leaves, but I did in the end. I just was not very comfortable. So I am going to come in and swap out the chisel nib on this marker. So here is the fine nibs that I was talking about. These come in a pack of 3. And here's the chisel nib. I almost never use my chisel nibs. Well, I almost never use my markers. So I just grabbed the nib with a paper towel and pulled it out of there. I'm sure people normally use tweezers. I'm sure people usually use tweezers to put the fine nib in there as well. But, you know, I'm anything if not lazy. So it worked. And here you can see the ink filling in that fine nib. I should have probably put it over a white piece of paper so you could see it better, but there's the ink filling it in, which is a minor miracle because most of my Copic markers are dry. All right, I am coming in with some blue ink and just inking up the edges of these die cuts. This is Stargazer ink, which is a darker color from Pinkfresh. And I'm using one of my cheap little ink daubers. I don't even know where to get these anymore because these are really scratchy, not very soft. So they're great for inking up the edges of your die cuts. Because they're not soft, they don't squish over and get ink where you don't want it. I have tried to find these again, but I think everybody's just trying to make better daubers. So it's hard to find the cheap ones now. Now you'll see that I decided to come in with blue leaves instead of green because I really just wanted the whole scene to be dark. That's why I inked up the die cuts with the dark blue I didn't want them to be so bright. All right, now I wanted to cut a frame to cover the bottom of the leaves and the mushroom, and I used the Perfect Touch rectangles. This is the biggest die in the set, which is A2 sized. And then I used a smaller rectangle die to cut out the opening in the middle to create the frame. So again, I have these off-white pieces. I know they look white, but they're off-white. And the little bottom part of the mushroom, I am just using the dauber to ink that up. And you can't really tell, but it does give a little bit of definition to this die cut. And I think I did end up making it a little bit darker. Now for the stem, I wanted it to come out from the middle of the mushroom. So there's this area of the die cut that I decided to cut a slit in. And that's why I have my old self-healing craft mat under here and my craft knife. And I'm just trying to make it big enough for that little stem to fit through there. And I really need to find a new craft knife. So if anybody has some good suggestions, I am open. This has been fine, but it's not my favorite for actually cutting die cuts. So here I'm just trying to make it a little bit of a smoother opening. And there we are. Now to attach my frame, I'm using these foam strips from Waffle Flower. And what I love is there's two different thicknesses or width. There's two different widths of the tape. The tape itself is 1/16 of an inch thick. It also comes in, I think, 1/8 inch thick. So that's a separate pack. But again, I love having these two different widths, and I went with the wider width for this. And you'll see at the bottom, I'm kind of just cutting the tape to fit around the die cuts that I had already glued to my panel. And now I can just pull off the release tape and very carefully eyeball adding in that frame. So I did a pretty good job. All right, so now I can add the rest of the die cuts, and now I'm using some thin black foam squares just at the top of the frog's head and a little bit of glue where it's gonna overlap the body. And I just think this frog is so adorable. Now for the flower, part of it is gonna be sitting on top of that stem, which I did double up, so that's a pretty thick stem. And I kind of learned after that first one to just put the tape directly onto the card panel right next to that stem so that I didn't have to worry about where the foam tape was on the back of the flower when putting the flower on the card base. So, by the way, that sentiment is from that sentiment set, and I did stamp it with an off-white embossing powder. I embossed it with an off-white embossing powder. I like using that when I don't have white elements on my card. I know it looks white in the photo, but it's not. And all the white die cuts that you see are actually off-white as well, except for the eyes. I did make his eyes a bright white. And I did find some teeny tiny little stars in my stash to add as embellishments at the top. I kind of thought of adding more, but I decided in this case maybe less was more. So that is it. That is my easy nighttime scene. It didn't require any fancy ink blending. It didn't require any stencils. Just a dark blue panel. And I think it's really effective, and I love how the adorable die cuts just pop off the card. So that is it. I am grateful that you joined me today. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. I know it's been a while since my last video. I have a few more planned for the next week, so hopefully I can pick things back up. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.